Okay, we need to talk. Last week, we started our Women in Grace in the Wilderness series. We spoke about Leah's story, one of my favorite stories. Today, we're going to speak about Hannah, a woman who longed for a child, and year after year, nothing. She prayed until her tears became her words. The wilderness isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a season. A stretch of life where you feel unseen, unheard, or unsure of what God's doing. But through every story, Leah, Hannah, Esther, and Ruth, we see that grace doesn't skip the wilderness, it transforms it. This is the Women in Grace in the Wilderness. Let's walk through their stories and maybe discover what God's shaping in ours. Okay, let's talk about waiting. Not the traffic light kind of waiting. It's the one that stretches you. Months, years, decades, tests your faith and makes you wonder if God still sees you. That was Hannah, a woman who longed for a child, and year after year, nothing. She prayed until her tears became her words. That's where her wilderness began. Not in silence, but in her bitter tears. And haven't we all been there? But God turned her bitterness into joy and her waiting into worship. People thought she was drunk in church praying. That's how much Hannah was praying. And sometimes the delay isn't punishment. It merely is preparation. So let's start from the beginning. So Hannah's story unfolds in 1 Samuel chapter 1. She was married to Elkanah, a man who genuinely loved her. But he also had another wife, Peninnah, who had children. And Peninnah never missed a chance to remind Hannah of what she didn't have. Haven't we got people like that? In 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 6, it says, her rival also provoked her severely to make her miserable, because the Lord had closed her womb. It sounds harsh, doesn't it? Why would God choose close her womb? As I read scripture, those words trouble me too. But I take comfort in James 1, which says, consider it pure joy whenever you face trials, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Sometimes God isn't closing the door forever. He's building something inside you. The wilderness looks like delay, but it's often a divine development. That's where the deepest heart and faith growth happens. And here's what I love about Hannah. She doesn't stop praying, didn't retaliate. She poured out, even though it was in bitterness. And honestly, that comforts me because it shows us the heart of God the Father. In 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 10, it says, she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Faith isn't tidy. It's messy. It's tear-stained, trembling, and still reaching heaven. In Romans 8, verses 26, the Spirit himself intercedes for us through the wordless groans. Even when Hannah couldn't form the words, her tears and her anguish were enough. Her ache, her bitterness of soul was enough. And that gives me so much comfort, because sometimes that is all you can do, just cry. Then comes this breakthrough, and it's not when she conceives, it's when she finds peace. In 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 18, it says, so the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. That's my everyday prayer. Peace of mind. This verse actually reminds me of Elijah when he begged God to end his life, and God simply supplied food, rest, and his presence. Sometimes that's all we need. I know food helps me so much. If Hannah had a smartwatch tracking her faith progress, her readings might look like this. Day 1, weeping in bitterness. A few months later, surrender before promise. Peace restored. After that, Samuel's birth, legacy secured. She would have unlocked so much in her spiritual life. Prayer would have been constant. Perseverance would have been high. And that's what we're being told in Romans. Struggle gives us perseverance. Peace indicators would be rising. That's transformation. When your soul changes before your circumstance does. Eventually, God gives Hannah a son, Samuel, whose name means heard by God. She kept her vow and dedicated him to the Lord. The woman who once felt empty becomes the mother of a prophet who anointed kings. Because in the wilderness, God births legacy out of surrender. Prayer isn't about convincing God, it's about realigning with Him. And later, Hannah has more children because God doesn't just restore, He multiplies. Truthfully, a lot of us are living Hannah's story right now, praying for jobs, dreams, and families that feel stuck. Bills keep shouting louder than hope, and sometimes faith feels like a luxury we can't afford. But God still hears the whispers between exhaustion and expectation. Your tears are not wasted. They're being recorded in heaven and rewritten as legacy here on earth. In Romans 8, verse 28, it says, "All things work together for good to those who love God." Every test, every quiet ache, it's working something good in you. And that's what this series is really about. Seeing our wilderness not as punishment, but as preparation. These stories help us to navigate our broken pieces with grace, with faith, and with wisdom. Every waiting season is an invitation to grow in grace, in mind, and in faith. And this is why I've created the Outsmart the Wilderness Tracker to help you notice where you are, what God might be teaching you, and how to stay faithful while you wait. It's a free guide that uses everyday tools to help shift our mindset about the wilderness. But more on this later. But for now, take a moment this week and journal your Hannah moments. Here are the journal prompts. What have I been praying for so long this began to feel impossible? How can I pour out to God honestly instead of holding it in? What would it look like to find peace before the outcome? This is part 2 of the Women in the Wilderness. Hannah, bitter tears, bold prayers. Next up, we have Esther, courage in hidden places. Because sometimes grace calls you to stand where fear tells you to hide. If Hannah's story encouraged you, share it with someone who's still in the waiting season, because waiting doesn't mean forgotten. Hi, I'm Yvonne, and this is Wing It with Thought, where we chat scripture in our modern day lives. And check out part 1, which was on Leah, linked below. If you haven't already, and you've gotten this far, I suggest you click the subscribe button so you don't miss the next video. Until next time, stay blessed.